Yesterday we talked about Sila. There are some points remaining to be talked about. Today we shall continue on this subject because it is very important. And in regard to this Sila, there are three things to be done, or it is of three kinds. Namely, the practice of Sila with regard to oneself, that is, in consideration of one's own dignity, not to lose one's dignity. Secondly, if we observe precepts with regard to or with consideration of others, with respect to others, or with regard to others. Thirdly, we sustain Sila because of our cherishment to the Dhamma. Because we appreciate and cherish the Dhamma, we observe Sila. In this way, there are three kinds of Sila. Now, as for the first one, sustaining precepts with regard to oneself, or in consideration of one's own dignity, that is, not doing what is not suitable for oneself, abstaining from such things which are not suitable for oneself, which are not appropriate for oneself. And one should have strong desire to abstain from such things with regard to oneself or in consideration of one's own dignity. As for the monks or lay people, one should have regard to oneself as a monk or as a lay person, respectively, and such kind of Sila is known as Adhadipateya, practicing Sila with regard to oneself or in consideration of one's own dignity. As a human being, one should have regard to or consider one's own dignity, which is very important, so as not to lose one's own dignity, whether one is a monk or a lay person. Otherwise, one's physical and verbal behaviors will become defiled and impure. And so, as for the monk also, they should have regard to their own dignity so as not to lose it, and in this way sustain Sila, so as not to lose their physical and verbal behaviors. Therefore, one should practice Sila not to lose one's own dignity. That is the first kind of Sila. So, such kind of Sila, that is, Sila with regard to oneself, not to lose one's dignity, is known as Adhadipateya. And the second one is Sila with regard to the world in general, or to all beings. And such a kind of Sila is known as Lokadipateya, having regard to the world. Since we also belong to the world, it is necessary, or it is essential, that we should get along with the rest of the world, so as not to commit wrongdoing by body and speech, and be able to abstain from wrongdoing as much as possible. Otherwise, one is bound to be blamed or criticized by the society. Of course, we are not free from blame. However, if one is criticized or blamed as regards one's moral conduct, one is bound to suffer great loss. So, one or those who wish to abstain those who wish not to be blamed or criticized by the society in this regard will have regard or will have consideration known as Loka Guru to the world. And such kind of Sila arising out of consideration for the world is known as Loka-Dipateya Sila. This is also very important. The third kind of Sila is known as Dhamma-Dipateya, arising out of regard or consideration to the Dhamma. Now, Dhamma has been translated in many ways, such as doctrine, law, states, and so on. However, Dhamma is defined as the exact guidance of teachings for one's own prosperity if one practices systematically, and also the disciplinary rules in order to cultivate one's physical mental behaviors. And the Dhamma sustains, uplifts, helps the Dhamma practitioner in this way. Even if one is not practicing the Dhamma as yet, in order to purify oneself, if only one understands by learning the correct method, one is uplifted in one's own right. That is, by knowing the correct method, one becomes knower of the Dhamma. In this way, Dhamma is said to have uplifted and sustained the Dhamma knower. And going further, if we practice to uplift one's physical, verbal behaviors and later cultivate the mind, if we do that, we will purify our physical, verbal behaviors. Then this belongs to you. You come to possess this pure physical, verbal behaviors. In this way also, Dhamma uplifts, sustains, helps the Dhamma practitioner, so that the Dhamma practitioner is not lowered or degraded. If only one practices Satipatthana Bhavana to uplift or to cultivate one's mind, as much as one undertakes Viriya Sati Samadhi, energy, mindfulness and concentration, you will be free from the gravitation of these impurities, overcoming the obsessive defilements, so that you will not be degraded. Instead, you will be uplifted. And if only you are able to cultivate knowledge, you will be able to overcome the latent tendencies of defilements until you are able to realize at least the first supramundane path, whereby you'll be able to be free from the gross forms of impurities which will pull you down to the states of loss. In this way, Dhamma is said to have uplifted or sustained or helped you. In this way, knowing the benefits of the Dhamma, knowing the quality of the Dhamma, one practices, and one practices Sila with regard to this beneficial Dhamma, is sustaining this Sila with high consideration of the Dhamma, so as not to commit wrongdoing by body and speech. And such kind of Sila is known as Dhamma-Dipateya Sila. For this young devotee whom we were talking about, he requested his teacher what to do next, because he wants to make an advancement, or he wanted to advance in the practice of these profitable kusala deeds. Because he had been practicing these profitable things, kusala, as instructed, he got a new name as one who is doing the practice in a pure way, Anupobha. However, was he satisfied with this? He was not satisfied with this. He wanted more, because he had a performance of paramis. He happened to be the one who had performed perfections. So just with the Sila was not enough for him. With Sila, one can only purify one's physical and verbal behaviors, but not yet the cultivation of mind with the practice of sati. If the mind is not cultivated with mindfulness, it will remain impure. So he was not satisfied with just the practice of Sila. He wanted to advance in his practice of kusala. So he asked the teacher what next to practice. Now this is quite commendable, because the young devotee was not satisfied with just the practice of Sila. In the enjoyment of sensual pleasures, one should be easily satisfied as much as possible. But that's why it is said one should take easily contentment in the enjoyment of sensual pleasures, because that means that one should not be too greedy in the enjoyment of sensual pleasures. Not to mention, if one is able to practice the mindfulness in order to cultivate one's mind. However, one should, in the case of Dhamma, that is to purify one's physical, verbal, mental behaviors, one should not stop in the middle. One should go to the end of the practice. One should not be satisfied with the practice unless one has reached the end of the road. So one should not stop in the middle with just simple kusala, which has no assurance of one's destiny. So understanding this, the young devotee was not satisfied with just the observation of 10 precepts. He wanted to be liberated from suffering. Hence his request to the teacher as what next to practice. Those people during the Buddha's time practice kusala, it is profitable deeds, profitable in the sense of blamelessness and purity with pleasant results. They may be just practicing simple profitable deeds, kusala, but live just casually and casually being satisfied with just simple kusala deeds. So those people are not practicing to be worthwhile living in the period of Buddha's dispensation in order to realize the path and fruition knowledge of the noble ones, at least the first Subramanian path. Instead, they are stagnating in the middle with just the practice of simple dana kusala, sila kusala, and kusala of taking refuge in the three gems. Buddha did not praise such people. The reason is that they are not living as worthwhile human beings in the period of Buddha's dispensation. That's why the Buddha says this to the monks. Monks, there are those who are doing just ordinary kusala, profitable in the sense of blamelessness and purity with pleasant results. They may be stagnating in the middle. The Buddha said, I do not praise such people who are stagnating in such kusala deeds, not to mention if they are downgrading, they are going down from such practices. Now, which kind of people does the Buddha praise? So the Buddha continues, monks, I praise those who can practice kusala so as to purify their physical, verbal behaviors and cultivate insight. And in this way, practice in such a way as to advance or develop and cultivate so that they become cultivated, they become advanced, and they become great and fulfilled. And instead of stagnating or just going down from that practice. In this way, the Buddha said these words directly to those, and this is something for us to note. As for the practice of kusala, profitable deeds, just with the practice of dana kusala, one may be reborn in the human and deva or celestial worlds and be able to realize such benefits as bhoga sampatti, the fulfillment of wealth, prosperity. It is supportive to the liberation from existential suffering, but not directly. It is indirectly supportive. And also, just with the practice of Sila alone can lead one to be reborn in the human and deva worlds. And suppose if one is reborn in the human and deva worlds as a result of the practice of Sila, one will still not be free from the existential suffering of old age, disease and death. If one has the body, one is bound to suffer as a result of the body. If one has the mind, one is bound to suffer as a result of the mind. So one will not be liberated from the existential suffering. So one should not be content with just this simple dana, sila, kusala. Hence, this young devotee requested his teacher what next to practice, and at that the teacher told him to become a monk. He exhorted the young man to become a monk, so he became a monk. To become a monk, pabijja or papijehi, is to leave one's home and go into homelessness. The implied meaning of this expression is to leave the world of human beings, ordinary lay persons, and to approach the monastery where you can meditate, a meditation center, as a monk, leaving the appearance of the layperson and to don robes, to wear robes, to appear like a monk, in order to extinguish these afflictions of raga, dosa, moha, craving, aversion and delusion. Asama, that is the place where this young man had gone as a monk, that is the place where one extinguishes the afflictive emotions such as craving, aversion and delusion, which are the difficult, afflictive fires, the internal fires which arise in one's body. And this is not just ordinary extinguishing, but extinguishing in a very intensive way. The yogis know about this. One practices Sila in order to overcome or extinguish the afflictive emotions which are transgressive, impurities, vitakama, kilesas. And with the practice of mindfulness, guarding your mind with vigilant mindfulness, or whatever arises, you extinguish the obsessive defilements, pariyutana kilesas, and with the application of energy, virya, you are not accepting the impurities. By not accepting, they are said to be overcome. They are not given a chance to arise in your stream of consciousness. And also with the exercise, with the exertion of energy, you are cultivating mindfulness, by which the impurities are not allowed, because the mind is protected, which is the quality of mindfulness, protected from impurities. And as you are concentrating your mind with the mindfulness, you are mindful, calm and collected on the object of attention, so that there is no distraction, wavering, scattering of the mind. As much as you apply these three mental powers, namely Viriya, Sati, Samadhi, energy, mindfulness and concentration, you are extinguishing these impurities, afflictive emotions, every second of the time that you are noting. And also you prevent them first and foremost, prevent these impurities from arising, and if they at all arise, you note and overcome them. In this way you extinguish these afflictive fires which are craving, aversion and delusion. And yogis know about it because they are practicing to be able to overcome these impurities. And as one practices, in the course of the practice, as much as the noting mind is concurrent with the object of attention, you are bound to overcome the latent tendencies of impurities, at least at the moment of the practice, that is, as your noting mind is concurrent with the object of attention. Because if you are able to overcome these latent tendencies, there will be no obsessive defilements coming up. And if there is no obsessive defilements, there will be no transgressive ones. When there are no latent tendencies, there will be no fires, kilesa fires coming up. If there is no kilesa fire, there will be no conflagration in terms of the dukkha, unwholesome, unprofitable deeds being committed. In this way, you are overcoming the gross the three grades, namely gross, medium, and refined form of these afflictive emotions which are within you. And with the intensive practice of the three trainings, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, by noting every second of the practice, not to miss mindfulness, you are gaining victory over these afflictive fires. So you can just imagine how you are able to do that. As for these worldly sensuous objects, they are the fuel for the arising or the affliction of these afflictive emotions, namely craving, aversion and delusion. So long as there is the fuel or there are the fuel, these fires are bound to burn and afflict those who are overcome by these sense objects. So long as there are fuels, there will be fires. It is not easy to extinguish fires so long as there are fuels. So the young man was advised to approach a place or a center where one can extinguish these fuel, where there is no fuel or which is free from fuel, so as to be able to extinguish easily with intensive method of meditation. Such a place is known as asama. That is the place where the afflictive fires are extinguished. The afflictive fires which burn inside us are extinguished. And such a place is known as asama. It is a monastery or a meditation center. So the young devotee approached this center or monastery in appearance of a monk. Why did he have to approach? Because these afflictive emotions, craving, aversion and delusion, are the causes of suffering. They are afflictive, they are oppressive, they are tormenting, undermining. And by indulging in them, one is bound to be afflicted by these fires. So, and they are very afflictive. They can burn you, just like ordinary fires, the real fires. When they burn, they leave behind hot things. And if they burn, one will feel hot, not cool or cold, because they are the causes for suffering. And this young man perhaps understood this very well. So, as instructed by the teacher, he approached this center known as asama, where he would be able to extinguish these afflictive emotions with intensive practice. Because these afflictive emotions or impurities are the causes of suffering. Maybe that he understood them very well. So he has to approach such a place or center where one can practice mindfulness every second of time in an intensive way to extinguish these fires of impurities, leaving behind the worldly affairs. If you don't leave behind worldly affairs, then you will not have enough time to undertake the practice to extinguish such fires. If you stay in the human world, in the world of the lay people, you will not be able to undertake such intensive practices. So, in a way, he was asked or instructed to leave behind his home life, and go into homelessness. In this way, he approached this place where he was able to extinguish these afflictive fires. In this way he ordained as a monk in order to achieve his purpose, namely to be liberation from suffering and to be one of the Buddha Sasana. However, just with the appearance, as an appearance, or with the appearance of a monk, the appearance will be just appearance. If one has not undertaken the practice, then he might stop at this stage. That is the stage of just appearance as a monk, and will not be able to achieve his purpose, namely liberation from suffering. So it was necessary for him to practice 3 trainings of Sila Samadhi Panya in order to overcome the 3 grades of his impurities. Otherwise he would just be in appearance and not yet a practitioner. So he had to transform himself from the monk by appearance to monk by practice. Only when he could behave as a practitioner would we be able to overcome the afflictive emotions which had been all along with him throughout his lifetimes. So he had to undertake these 3 trainings and he became a practitioner, a monk by practice. And for this he had to approach another teacher or teachers. One teacher was to teach him the lessons on mind and body, rupa, nama, rupa, nature, the nature of mind and body. And another teacher was to teach him the rules of conduct for monks. So within these 2 teachers, he was encountering some trouble, some problems, and because of this problem, the Buddha had to solve in order to be able to practice to achieve his purpose. This we shall discuss tomorrow.